Okay, strap in. I definitely will not be doing this voiceover all in one shebang because day 129 of a screenwriter's journey looks like a whopper, like an over an hour and a half or something. If I was saying I'd break this into 3 days, but that wouldn't be fair to you. Maybe maybe I just forgot to pause it and I left my computer for a long time. We will see. There's a cat in the background making a lovely noise. Operation Surgical Strike. Six. Oh, so Operation Surgical Strike is my code word for, or code phrase, I should say, for saying what is the very least amount of work I can do to make this Act One sync up with the rest of the movie. I've spoken before how that never works, but there's if at first you don't succeed, try again. So that's what I'm going to try to do. It's how crazy is it after all that 40 pages of notes taking that I write Operation Surgical Strike, and based on that sentence, I'm going to try to redo the whole first act of the movie. All right, so the good news is, well, it's all good news. This is November 24th, and this is 6 weeks later, basically. A little less than that. And so what I can tell you is that what I believe I'm going to be writing is, what's the word, derivation? Pretty close to, a close cousin of the relatively current version of the script, I would say. I'd have to think about that. But I think that's right because I had all the plans to completely change the opening, completely make it different. And then I think I talked to one of my sons. I may have mentioned this before. And he said, Dad, you really have a good script, so don't screw it up. Well, that was kind of him, but it isn't. I mean, it may be a good script, but good scripts never get sold. And as they say, you can't make a great movie out of a good script, but you can make a good movie out of a great script. Thank you. I'll take some more royalties now. So what I'm going to try to do here is set up, man, I keep adjusting the volume, and just a tiny little adjustment seems to make a big difference. Not that you need to know that. So here we go. So Holly is now mid-20s. In the earlier version, she was like 21, 22, which, I mean, to play that sort of nanny, well, whatever. It didn't. This, I think, is much more realistic, especially after talking with that lady. So she's still in the van, and now I've introduced two fit early 30s males. Oop. Oh, I even gave them names. Look at that. And so they are working the operation with her. And we still have Paul there, who is, kind of her uncle-ish. Not necessarily, but, I mean, he's sort of uncle figure. Although, he's only 12, 13, 14 years older. So maybe like a big brother, more like. His line there, no shame in showing nerves, very on the nose. I think I'll need to fix that. And so his second line alludes to the fact that either this is Holly's first day on the job or she's doing something she normally doesn't do, which we eventually get to, the idea being that she was not really recruited so much as volunteered to do this temporary detail. I feel like my voice is a little raspy, but that's okay. All right. So then, be careful what you wish for. You could almost call a theme, although I wouldn't because it's on page 1. But, I mean, that's, money can't buy you love. That could be a theme. That's probably been a movie. It's definitely been a song. And when you think about it, that you could come up with all kinds of very short, pithy sentences that really sum up a lot of movies. The same sentence be careful what you wish for. That could sum up a lot of movies. Not that it's going to sum up this one, but what Holly's saying, reading Paul's mind, is that she has obviously asked for this, and he has, so to speak, granted her wish. So let's just see what happens. All right, so the idea before, and I think this hasn't changed a lot, the original idea was that Holly went in, grabbed the girl, and took her away. So now the setup is more like Rachel has coordinated, scheduled, arranged, whatever, with Paul through, I mean, not directly with Paul probably, but through the U.S. Marshals. I'm going to testify against my ex-husband or whatever, the crime family. You're going to take me into protective custody, into the WITSEC program, and I'm going to let my little girl Lexi go with you guys, and she's going to go into the foster system, hopefully get adopted and grow up well. So I'm trying to set up Rachel more as kind of a, well, she already was kind of a jerk, but I'm trying to really boil down, because several wise people have told me, or maybe I've read, really every line of dialogue from a given character should come from that character's sort of truth or place, or, you know, if someone is generous, everything they say, he or she says, should come from that place. If someone is a jerk or someone's angry or resentful, not that they can't evolve, but at any given time, that's where their dialogue should come from. And I guess I typically try to do that anyways, but I'm going to make an extra attempt in this draft. Excuse me. So we've got the girl, 6 years old. She's got a bunch of stuffed animals around. Her mom comes in, and it's apparent from their dialogue that the girl already knows they've got some adventure. So she is, like it says, remarkably awake. And then we see that she's fully dressed. So she obviously knows that something's going on. How much has her mom told her? How much would you tell a 6-year-old if your intention was to basically abandon her? And now I'm playing around with this idea that I've had from the very beginning, which is always dangerous, and that is the Aunt Holly idea. Not really her aunt, but as this draft evolves, I think we may find out that that whole aunt thing is kind of overrated, and maybe it's not super duper important. But maybe it is. So let's just play along. So obviously Rachel has told her daughter that her aunt is coming to pick her up or do something with her. And Holly looks at Rachel and is like, oh my gosh, why are you doing this? But then she plays along by saying, I sure am. Little girl, super happy, runs over, jumps up on Holly. So so I'm totally playing with this dialogue here. And I'm trying really to give Holly relatively few lines. And I think that's sort of I'm doing it on purpose, and not that she's the strong silent type. She is strong. She's not necessarily silent, but I think it's interesting, especially depending on the actress or the actor, depending on the role, is really not giving them, or not thinking you have to give them the lines, and they have to speak throughout. Because, you know, if you can act without speaking, obviously that's a big feather in your cap. Just the looks you give, your body language and that sort of thing. So I kind of have that in mind also. And I'm trying to establish Rachel again as sort of a jerk, sort of bossy, sort of controlling. because that is hopefully going to set things up for later. And the whole idea that the little girl is like super happy and jumps into Holly's arms. Holly's not expecting it. I think that's a nice bit. Will it work? Let's find out. I'm just thinking this couldn't have been Thanksgiving Day. It must have been the day before. I think it was, because I had that day off from work. So I probably got up at my normal early time so I could really give this a whack, which it looks like I did. Whether it's good or not is another thing. I don't know if you ever are like that on a weekend or something. You get up, because it is a job. It's not like, I get up at 8 o'clock and do whatever and start writing at 10 or 11, which, I'm not poo-pooing that. But the days where I know I'm going to write and I go, oh my gosh, I got 3 hours I can write today, or I've got 5 hours I can write today. And I'm sure a lot of people are like that, but it really is kind of a motivator, and it can definitely get you up even on the weekends, or maybe especially on the weekends. All right, so we're outside, and so Paul's looking around, he's checking. So the idea is that maybe something bad is afoot, or he knows that they got to get out of there quick. So then we've got this discussion between Rachel and Holly and the girl. So of course, what I'm thinking is, how likely is it that a girl would go with someone other than her mom? And then later I had a conversation with my wife about the power of the word aunt to a 6-year-old, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I think, and of course this is the movies and I'm the god of this screenplay, so I can write whatever I want, but if the girl thinks that she's just going with this nice lady, whether she's her aunt or not, and then is eventually, they're going to go in the same place, and they're just driving in separate cars for some reason. But, is that believable? Hopefully so, because that is the conceit of this. Otherwise, there's the version where the girl is kicking and screaming and Holly placates her. Well, not really. Holly stuffs her in the van, or the other guy does, maybe the guy with her. And then Holly saves the day by calming the girl down, I've kind of thought of that version. I haven't written it, but that's certainly maybe, I don't know if that'd be more or less interesting. In a way, it seems a little more cliche, but I might try it. All right, so Rachel saying I can still call this off, and then Holly not without the permission of 1/9 of the Supreme Court. That's going bye-bye, I believe, because so there's nothing. The whole Supreme Court angle and the judge and everything is gone. So if you like that, you could read it in the previous version. So the men split up, Harper and Sims. One goes with Holly, one goes with Paul. Obviously taking the luggage with them. And then he's telling whoever that they're out of there. That will come into play later on. Not really later on in the story, but later on in my rewrites. He said with insider information. So this I realize I've got Holly and Harper, and then later I have Holly and Hogan. So at some point I'll probably change Harper's name. So this scene here is one that I am going to play with today and in days to come, trying to figure out, because I want that save the cat moment that someone mentioned I should have, which is a great idea. And so how much humor do I want? How is Holly going to sort of steal this little girl's heart to some extent? How are we going to work in the fact that she's changing her name? And so my first thought is, if Holly is the aunt, then the girl is like, is he my uncle? God, no. We get a little laugh there, maybe. And then, so when I wrote God, no, I thought, gosh, because it's a girl. And then the little girl is, talking about being worldly because she knows swear words. And then, so that's kind of cute and all that. I don't know that it deserves 5 lines of dialogue, so we'll see what happens there. But then we jump right to how long before we're there. If you go to sleep, by the time you get there, by the time you wake up, we'll get there. And then the girl's like, Mommy too. And Holly and Harper are exchanging glances, not saying anything. So the girl talks about whispering. So this is literally the first draft of this version. So it's pretty rough. I'm not saying it's horrible or wonderful. I'm just saying it's a little rough. Excuse me. I don't know where that line of Holly, I guess Holly could sort of discern that, and there she goes saying poop after she says it's a swear word. I thought that was a little bit funny, at least. I don't know what great insights I can really bring to this. And especially since this is such a long day, some of this may just play without me talking much, but maybe not. So there, I've already cut that out. You always wonder when you write something and you cut it out right away, how often you regret and you go, man, I wish I would have saved a draft with that sparkling dialogue because now I've lost it forever. But in this case, I haven't, because I could always go back and look at the screen recording. But I don't think I ever will. So now we're talking this idea of the stuffed animal. So here comes Holly with a save the cat moment. And then there's always a question of where and how to end the scene. I know that you typically, of course, come into a scene as late as you can, which sometimes in the beginning of a movie is probably harder. Because you don't know the characters, you don't know the situation. As you go on in a film, in a story, you can generally enter them later. But ending a scene, some people will end on dialogue, and I don't really like that unless it's super obvious why you've done that. But in my case, it seems like you always have to have a payoff. And to me, the payoff is usually some reaction to a dialogue, whether it's an expression, action, running away, slamming a door, whatever. You've got to have some period on a scene. And to me, the period that comes at the end of dialogue isn't necessarily it. All right. So I'm just playing around a little bit here. Oh, maybe I've left the computer. Nope. So now I'm trying to come up with a clever way to say what Harper just said there, because that's obviously very on the nose. The girl is asleep, obviously. And one thing I realized is that the girl has not been named yet. In the previous version, Holly named her, and then she said, "That's not my name." And then Holly said, "It is now," which to me, I still like that. It's kind of an ominous thing, but yeah, this is. So Harper is, being the realist, sort of the jaded guy who's obviously been there, done that with cases like this. deal with it or it'll deal with you. That's like bad soap opera dialogue. Who wrote that? So now the girl is actually awake, which doesn't really work. Now I've already deleted it. I look back and probably roll my eyes. So, yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to get this information across without being super on the nose. And again, it's a lot easier to get away with that early on in a movie because you could have a scroll, obviously a Star Wars thing. You could have a speech, you could have a voiceover, which to me isn't ideal. But again, if it sucks people in, then that's fine. And I changed his name. Oh, to McNeil, it looks like. Except his name is still Sims in the beginning. Ha! That's funny. Yeah, so obviously you try to get across information without being on the nose of what that information is. And of course, again, McNeil's dialogue is coming from the place of being a little jaded, having done this before, being kind of cold-hearted out of necessity, in his opinion. Whereas Holly is hopefully coming across, as the green new person who is trying to have compassion and that stuff. So I changed that wording a little. McNeil's line, hell of a mom, probably grammatically correct, no, but I think it could work. So he's sort of piling on. So then, see, at this point, oh, yeah, that's right. I left it that we still don't know what the girl's name is on purpose. So this, excuse me, oh my goodness, how embarrassing. So this is a new scene here, virgin writing, as I like to say, which is always exciting and scary a little. So introducing Abby, who in this version is the daughter of the parents who were bringing Lexi into their world, is in a foster family situation. And, it is and it isn't important why they decided to do it and all of their backstory, but they're literally in such a small part that I don't even really give them names, or I don't give them names. So Abby meets the little girl, whatever her name is, and is super outgoing and vivacious and trying to make her feel at home. I did give them names in the dialogue. We'll see if that works. So now I'm thinking, what is this little girl's mindset? Does she think, does she realize, oh, the jig's up, I'm not going to see my mom again? Does she think this is for, a extended play date? Does she think she's never going to see her mom again, et cetera, et cetera? And even though I haven't mentioned it, it's apparent that the girl, for whatever reason, doesn't have a father. Is he dead? Are they just divorced? Exactly what? But, she's not crying for her daddy by any means. So in this version, okay, yeah, McNeil is waiting out front. Yeah, so this was before I did some research. Obviously, and it's probably apparent to you, as it will become to me after I do my research, that Holly would not do this all on her own. Even if they've set it up with a foster agency or that sort of thing. She wouldn't do this on her own. So that's going to change. Do not fret. Holly trying to make her feel at home. The girl wondering how long she's going to be there. And there, sorry, we've got Lexi for the first time. Wow, this is riveting stuff, isn't it? I always like to erase as I go because I don't like to get too far over budget. I'm 110 pages right now. And then, so there we have the bum, bum, bum. My name's not Lexi. It is now. Don't know if that's super important compared to how it was. Give me your thoughts in the comments. I get a lot of them. Actually, I haven't even looked at comments. I guess if I got any, I would probably see them in my YouTube, in my Gmail inbox. It's okay. Here's Lexi saying something that is probably going to come back to haunt her / bite her. And this introduces the whole idea that she is sort of taking this girl under her wing. Why? We don't know. Will we understand it? Will it just be obvious or apparent to the audience just because that's what women do? Warning, sexist. No, not really. I do not apologize for that. And then, so if Holly says that, I'm wondering, what would the agency poo-poo that? Would the foster people encourage it, or exactly what? So I'll have to do a little research on there. So Holly nods her thanks, and here we are back in the van. She's obviously told McNeil what she's done. He's not super happy about it. This scene is going to take a lot of work. Hint, hint. Spoiler alert. Yeah, so breathe anywhere to that. Yeah, this part in here, right here. I bet before it's all through, I'm guessing I will rewrite this scene 3 or 4 times. Not today, but overall. So as I said, I'm trying to get across the relationship, or the budding relationship, between Holly and who will become the more or less grown up Lexi, using McNeil basically as a instrument or a tool, I guess, if you will, to sort of get some of that stuff across. And when you do that, he's really not going to appear in the movie after this, so he's kind of a throwaway character. So the question always is, do you do that? Do you bring in a character who is going to be throughout? Would she have the same conversation with Paul just to keep the character count down? So again, a little on the nose with the social worker, deputy U.S. Marshal. Would he really be that disgusted, or would he just sort of dismiss it? So now she's back at the office the next day or whatever, and we really don't know how far they traveled from where they picked up Lexi to this new foster home. I mean, they could have put her on a plane and flown her and driven her, or it could have been 50 miles, it could have been 300-mile road trip. We really don't know, and I don't know that it really super matters. So the scene in the office where she's at her cubicle, from Paul's line, we know that McNeil told him, that basically he and Holly didn't have that conversation. So I sort of like this. Oh man, that was a horrible line. I'm glad I got rid of that. I like the "is there something else you tell me?" So again, this is first time through Virgin scene, playing around with what is the agenda of the scene. Basically, Paul is sort of testing Holly to see if how she liked it, what she thinks her aptitude for it might be, and therefore he'll be able to sort of tell the same thing. And we're seeing that Holly is not really super telling she's not lying, she's just not revealing everything that happened. And that will obviously come into play later. Speaking of later, now it's 12 years later, and so we're kind of we're introducing these three characters who were in the other version, continue to be, Abby reintroducing her older. Still at the volleyball game and setting up the idea that Lexi has sort of told them that Holly has said she's got some surprise for her. So I'm just going through here thinking what it could be, and again giving backstory of now we know that she's adopted because of Abby's line. So obviously the prior dialogue from the other version of the script is completely going away. And then Luke's line tells us that Lexi and Jake have been dating for 3 years. So basically he was a senior, she was a freshman. And then Jake, so I'm trying to establish Luke is sort of the, funny, goofy, lighthearted one, and Jake is the more serious, take no crap one. So continuing on, we'll see if my voice sounds different because it's tomorrow. So I just described kind of the characters I'm trying to set up. But I don't know that this dialogue is something that these guys would say. Of course, we've just met them, so they could say anything we wanted. I'm trying to get in also the competitive nature that the four of them have, which is basically the same as the first version of the script. And sometimes as I write, I'm sure you do the same thing. You're writing and then you go, ooh, I thought of a better way to say that dialogue. The last bit I wrote, or you think of another word to put in, and that's just how it goes. Now, so Jake is sort of putting down his brother. And this is all, as I say, virgin dialogue. So it's just really feeling it through, feeling it out, seeing what feels like it works and what doesn't. And as I've said before, sometimes right away, it's like, why did I even write that dialogue if I know it's bad? But I think the truth is that until you write it and you see it and you sort of look at an interchange or an exchange of characters, you don't really know if it's bad, how bad it is, if it rings true. Obviously, in a situation like this, where it's the first time that the audience has heard Jake and Luke and Abby talk, other than Abby when she was a little girl, and so that's the first time that the screenwriter, has written their voices. Will typically take a while. I don't know that writing character descriptions and doing, that research and homework, which is good, I don't think that can really make you write better dialogue. I think the only way to write it is to write it. And you've heard stories of people who will like go to a coffee shop and sit and listen to people talk to get an ear for dialogue. And I can see that in one sense, but in the other sense, unless it's My Dinner with Andre, where it's literally a dinner with a guy named Andre, spoiler alert, I don't know how much you can really learn. You could learn sort of cadence and lingo, you know, if you had to write something in the Bronx or write something for a dialect or a part of the country. But in terms of structurally what they say and how it moves the story along, it's not like you're going to go into a coffee shop, secretly, discreetly record dialogue and then bring it back and use it in your script, because I don't think that it would sound anything like a conversation. Because in movies, vast majority of the time, Captain Obvious says that dialogue goes much quicker. It's much more condensed. There should be no fluff. Everything should move the story ahead, reveal character, raise conflict, you know, ticking clock, rising stakes, good news, bad news, that sort of thing. All right, so what am I doing here? I kind of missed some dialogue. Ever wish I would have told that Luke had a brother? So we're establishing the fact of how Abby set Lexi up with Jake. Jake's line introduces the idea that they're going on this weekend getaway trip, but it's not very good dialogue. So a phone rings, so nothing beats a phone ringing, right, for true excitement and to shift the tone or the pace or bring some immediacy to a scene. Knocking on the door, the phone rings, a bomb goes off. That's always good. Also, I feel like I can't get the volume quite right on this microphone. Okay. All right, so we've sort of set it up. I don't know why I say we so much. Excuse me. That the three of them knew that Holly was going to call or had something in mind because of Abby's line at the bottom of page 9. So she's calling her Aunt Holly. Does she really think she's her aunt? I don't know. The other thing is when you're listening to just one end of the phone call, it's always kind of fun and fascinating how you get the context of what the other person said without hearing them. And that's, I don't know if I'm good or bad at it, but it's definitely a skill that you sort of learn. So, for instance, on Lexi's there, hey, Aunt Holly. And Holly has probably said something like, hey, I'd like to meet you for dinner or something. We need to get together. And then off of that, Lexi's like, sure, but would it be cool if having the guys come? And then she's like going, that's my cartoonishly tense face. That's what I'm picturing, pulling the shirt collar. And so what we didn't hear is Holly say, well, I'd really like to talk to you alone about something that's pretty important. And then Lexi says, I understand, da-da-da-da-da. And so she concludes based on that, definitely bad news. And then we bring up the thing about your real mom, Lexi's real mom. Yeah, this is, it's sort of juvenile writing, which is fine because Luke is sort of that kind of happy-go-lucky guy, but I'm trying to get the idea across that Holly, who is a certain actress who is she's not super muscular, but she's very fit. And, how would you say that? Would you say guns? Would you make like a miming of a giant bicep, or exactly what? just reading along. So again, sometimes you just rush through it because you know what you want to say, but you're not set on how you're going to say it. Yeah, so now Jake's making a joke, which I'll leave it to you if it's at all humorous. I'm not super wild about it. But again, getting the idea that, Luke is the wimpier or the more whatever pacifist or something of the two. But then they go and they start fighting on the sand. The girls have seen it all before. And Abby is like, really, dude? And now Abby's making this promise. I'm here for you, which is kind of a foreshadowing of something to come. Will she really be there for her when the poo-poo hits the fan? And Abby offers her, obviously, to take the car. She'll get a ride. And you can see I've got some of the dialogue from the previous draft. So it's a no on the eloping. It was never a yes. It's funny when you get into such a different mindset, even if the characters haven't changed a lot, it's not necessarily cringy, but it just feels so wrong. It's not like you can write half a scene with new dialogue and then say, oh, I'm going to pick up where I wrote that other scene 6 months ago. That would be quite a talent if you could do that. And then I think I asked my sons about Heckle and Jekyll, because I'm sure, that was a cartoon in the 40s maybe, or the 30s or the 50s, and whether that would resonate with any audience, let alone a young audience, in terms of who they would picture as Heckle and Jekyll. And so I asked them, frick and frack, yin and yang, just really any two kind of goofy sounding names. Not sure that's how you spell Jekyll. Anyways, that may change. If you love it, you can steal it. But I'll have proof that you stole it from me. Not really, but okay. So I'm already changing it up such that Holly's not gonna come and pick up Lexi, that she's gonna take a car. Maybe she's got her own car. All right, so now here we are in the restaurant, and what better place to have a conversation than in a restaurant? What movie has not? I bet that would be super interesting to look at all the movies ever made and find out how many did not involve a restaurant or some sort of eatery and dialogue. And I wonder why that is. I guess it's just such a super common place to literally sit and talk, because that's what you do over a meal. And the other thing is, just while I'm letting myself write, at what point do you pick up not just the dialogue, but do you pick up the meal? Have they just gotten their menus? Are they just giving them to the waitress or the waiter? Are they just getting their drinks? Are they just getting their meal? Are they in the middle of eating? Or are they getting the check? So there's a million ways you can do it, and obviously what you choose implies at what part of the conversation they're in. So in the goes without saying department, if they are eating their dessert, they wouldn't be saying, hey, how are you today? So one thing, and this has nothing to do with script writing, but sometimes you see people eating. The problem with eating is continuity when you actually film it, because unless you have a super good actor or a super hungry actor and they take a bite out of a hamburger in the master shot and then in the close-up and then in the over-the-shoulder for continuity, and then you got to do 2 or 3 takes, and every time they're taking a bite of hamburger, unless they're not going to chew it and they're going to spit it out, that's a lot of food. If it was like a French fry, that would be one thing. Of course, you would have to make sure there was the same amount of French fries. And even drinking, because, you've got to have the level of whatever the beverage is be darn close. All right, so Holly's been putting off what she's going to tell her, and as Lexi says, just rip off the Band-Aid, which is, you could also look at that as, all right, Mr. Screenwriter, just tell the story. Just give me the exposition. So she's talking here about her parents. Holly's talking about your parents, meaning Lexi's parents, the adopted parents, obviously. And I know I talked with, not talked, but I think emailed with the guy who read the script, who had all these comments that led to this giant rewrite, which hopefully will turn out for the best. But he was saying, I don't know if he specifically said it, but maybe it led me to wonder, would Holly really wait until Lexi was 18 to tell her anything at all about what had happened, the truth about her mom? And we never really talked much about the dad. So there may be some understanding, or at least a belief on Lexi's part, that her dad died. And maybe even Rachel had told her before they split up, when Lexi was 6, that the dad had died, or they had gotten divorced. You're never going to see him again. He's going to go to jail. He's a bad guy, whatever. But Holly's just told her that her parents, her real parents, birth parents, whatever, are still alive. I did look up too, and I guess birth parent or birth mother, I think is the most frequently used. There are, my real mom, or I think that's kind of poo-pooed because it insinuates that you have to be the biological mom. Obviously, that would be the most succinct, maybe not succinct, but correct, is to say my biological mother, which now that I think about that, maybe I'll change it. Okay, so here goes Holly spilling the story, which is kind of the same, I think, as before. But it does beg the question, could have she at least told her when she was probably not 12, but maybe 14 for sure, 16? But Holly's logic and reasoning is, which I don't know that I've gotten to it yet or talked about it in the previous version, but a 14, 15, 16-year-old, if you tell her the truth, if she's sort of not unbalanced, but if she's, insecure or has always wondered, who's to say she won't just run away from home, blindly strike out and try to find her? Obviously, that would basically be impossible, but it could still happen. So I'm trying to figure out, A, what exactly I want Rachel's backstory to be, and then, of course, B, how to phrase that in a way that is palatable for the audience. So this assumes that Lexi knows who the Salernos are, which I guess if they were super famous, how many 18-year-olds would know about crime families, though? Unless it's like Al Capone, I don't know. One thing, man, this is a long day. When Lexi says unknowingly, as in Love is Blind, again, if this was a real dialogue, Holly would make some reference to that or reply to it or something. But this case, it's just basically Lexi saying out loud maybe what the audience is thinking of. How could that happen? Oh, Love is Blind. Holly doesn't have to react to that. She can just continue on, which is kind of a nice thing you can do in movie dialogue that I don't think you would typically do in real life. You don't typically kind of basically ignore what the other person said. It's always, a very, very much back and forth in real conversation. She's been bored. She's afraid. So now I've got to concoct the whole, and again, this is kind of the virgin writing, so I'm trying to concoct the whole backstory of what Rachel did once she found out. And you could obviously take this a million different ways, and I am trying just a few of them. So I'm just going to sort of let this play for a minute. Wow, I just yawned and my UV meters popped up. It must have been a loud yawn. And as I've often said, I'm always cognizant of how much dialogue, what that block of dialogue is. Right now, that's like almost 8 lines. Well, 7 in a word. So I'm breaking it up. That was another yawn. It's about time to call it quits here, but let's see if I can. So, introducing the idea that Lexi, I don't know that growing up she would have had any reason to think she was somehow in the witness security program, witness protection, or not. She would probably know what it was. I would imagine if you watch TV's, movies, cop shows, or maybe just general knowledge, I would assume most 18-year-olds would know what they would know what witness protection and whether, I don't think a lot of people know that it's actually called witness security, let alone the WITSEC acronym. So now we're getting a little bit talky here. And Holly bringing up the fact that maybe they've never specifically talked about it, but she says, "You do know I'm not your aunt." And the whole thing of the aunt also is something that I don't think yet, as I wrote this, I was beginning to question, but at some point I really started questioning how big of a deal is that? How important is that? How much credibility or credence or how much weight would that give Holly in Lexi's eyes when Lexi was 6? And I will maybe discuss that at a future time. But right now, we're going to continue on. This is 2 days later on the voiceover. Hopefully my voice is sounding better. Not that that is a major draw. But I was talking about the whole Aunt Holly thing and how important that was. There's some things, you've probably experienced this in your writing, where you start out with something and you just hang on to it. It's sort of like the favorite Christmas present or the favorite pair of shoes or shirt or whatever, and it's good for a time and then it kind of wears out and it's not really needed, but you hang on to it. And that's sort of the same thing that at least I go through when I write, whether it is a character that you just need to get rid of, or if it's a character trait that doesn't really fit, or if it's a plot device that you just thought was so clever. And sometimes, just like your favorite line of dialogue, they say you have to kill your babies or something like that. Maybe not quite as radical sounding as that, but sometimes you just have to do it. And it's amazing how long it can take. And sometimes you don't. It's not like you have to abandon everything you want, but if you're trying to make the story work around a certain, plot point or character, or again, a character trait or something you've come up with, and you're just fighting and you're twisting the story to make it work, it's usually a sign that you need to give it up. So let's see, where are we in the script here? So they're talking. You're not my aunt. But why do you let me finish the day after we came? So now, of course, we're into the backstory here. And I believe they're at the restaurant, right? And as I've said, what better place to hold a meaningful conversation than at a restaurant? And I mentioned I should do a study someday to see how many movies do not have scenes where they're eating around a table at a restaurant at home or a picnic or anywhere. Probably very few. Okay. That food truck, my daughter wants to start a French fry food truck. So if you're watching this and you get that idea, it was hers first. So please don't take it from her. She may be upset with me if you do. But obviously that is just so. Oh, I see what I did. Sorry. I changed it from a restaurant. And so now they're getting food on a food truck. And instead of sitting in this booth, they're going to go for a walk in a park on a walking trail, which, I mean, visually, obviously is a lot more interesting. That way they can literally walk and talk. It's just a more engaging environment. Something could happen there. They could run into someone. A bear could come out of the woods and, attack one of them. If things go badly in the scene, that could always, someone could kidnap one of them or not really. So basically the conversation is the same. I just changed where it's happening. And sometimes, sometimes it's easiest just to write the dialogue and you literally don't care if they're eating, if they're sitting around a table, if they're playing cards, if they're watching TV while having a conversation, if they're on the beach, if they're on a walk, if they're on their bikes. I would say get the scene right and then fill in the other stuff. And maybe in doing so, it'll give you some ideas for character things, for little symbolism that you can throw in. But you don't always think of the best setting before you write the scene. Sometimes the setting is obvious or it even is necessary. Sometimes it's not. In this instance, a walking in silence could be similar to sitting in a restaurant and just sitting there and not talking. But in this instance, if one of them gets mad, like Lexi may get mad, Holly may get mad, and then they walk ahead, they run off, they do something like that. Obviously, in a restaurant, you could stand up and storm off and throw your glass or something like that. But different ways of accomplishing the same thing. All right, the good news is I don't have to. Neither of us do. So Lexi is asking all these questions about her mom. And Holly, we don't really know for sure how much Holly has kept in touch with Rachel at this point. So Lexi is probably trying to feel out that also. And so now I've changed the infamous answer a question with a question. Okay, so this is obviously a big revelation, and this is where things will get interesting in that she's going to mention that, she's setting something up to meet her mom. What I did not realize at the time, and I probably shouldn't say this now, is the catalyst in a movie, something typically happens to the main character. And whereas at the end of Act 1, the break into 2, it's typically a proactive move by the main character to take a stance, to go somewhere geographically or emotionally or whatever, take a chance on something. But the catalyst, typically something happens to that person to sort of disrupt their world and then move them into the debate stage where they're trying to figure out if what is happening to them is going to be big enough to kick them into the second act. And of course it is, or it wouldn't be a movie. So that's up to the screenwriter to make the catalyst something that's, it could seem unimportant or small at the time, a letter in the mail, a phone call, some revelation, something happened. I mean, something has got to happen, and that's got to kick things off where then they're going to debate, am I going to go and do this? What are the ramifications? And that debate part of the script can be really tricky. And whether you believe in the strikes the cat in the hat, the save the cat, or whatever, that part of the script can be tricky. Usually the opening, the first 10 pages, if the first 10 pages are not good, the script is probably going to be lousy, because those are the easiest to write, at least for me. The ending can be easy to write sometimes. I guess all parts can be easy, can be hard, but that part from page 10 or 12 to page 25, 28, whatever, it can be tricky because your inclination sometimes is just to go, get the story moving, and then you haven't really laid the groundwork, which you need to do in the setup, obviously, but then you need to continue and carry that on through the next 10, 12 pages or whatever. All right, let's see, what am I doing here? So Lexi's finding out about Holly. That line at the bottom of 13 is pretty much trash. Deputy U.S. Marshal Hard at your service. Obviously, it's not delivered seriously, but as I wrote, her attempt at levity falls flat, which means the screenwriter's attempt at levity probably fell flat too. So it appears that I've walked away from my writing while I was, maybe not. Catches up the shoulders and grabs her wheels around to face her. So Lexi kind of gets upset about that, and she pouts a little and goes off. Holly catches up in a short. Did I mean that? Really? Gosh, sometimes when I've said it a million times, you write your virgin writing, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I really did write that. So now Holly's giving more of the backstory that she as in Holly told her adoptive parents, her meaning Lexi, about her mother meaning Rachel, and they sort of mutually agreed that it would be best if she didn't know, because like I said, maybe they thought she'd try to run off and find her, or who knows. And as I've made the point before in the script, in earlier versions, it's kind of funny how you turn 18 and suddenly, oh, you're an adult, you can do this, you can do that. And obviously, one tick of the clock does not change anything. It's a gradual evolution of maturity and all that good stuff. So it is sort of funny that an 18-year-old can make decisions that can affect her life, whereas a 17-year-old in 364 days cannot. It's kind of crazy. Okay. I didn't love my job if anyone found out. Now, see, I don't know if that's true or not. May have to do some research. 3 years, it doesn't matter. Why is that? I had no legal say, but now you're 18, you're due. So I'm sort of getting there about the legalities of 18, and I think it is a reasonable thing that they would wait. I don't know. Maybe it's not at all. But I wrote the script, and I can make my own decisions. All right, so Lexi's now realizing it's sort of becoming real to her that, oh my gosh, I can see her, you know where she is, you can arrange something. And still kind of playing with this to see how I want it to work in terms of how quickly she meets her, under what circumstances. Is it still going to be kind of this cabin thing where they go up to the go-karts, or are they going to go axe throwing first? Are they not going to do any of that? Is it going to be a weekend? Is it just going to be a trip up to see her? Who's going to go with her? And so setting all that up, I don't know if it was surprising how hard it was, but it was not easy. Lexi's trying to get some more background information. Holly's says in a secure environment, which is sort of BS, I think. The fact that she would say it, meaning the fact that I would write it for her. I don't know what that would consist of, but it certainly wouldn't be these cabins at the Eagle Creek Escape, as I believe it's called. I sure hope I can use that place if I ever film this, or someone does, because it's an awesome place. And I'm not being paid to say that. Wow, the day is over. That was a long, long day. You probably took a couple days, maybe a month to watch this, but that's how it goes. So day 129 in the can, making some progress. The good thing is when you are writing as in screenwriting and you're turning out pages, you can turn out 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever, and you feel like you got somewhere. Of course, you may come back the next day and realize, not so good. But if you don't write, you'll never win an Academy Award. That's what I keep telling myself. I've got it right next to my bed. All right, see you tomorrow.